Hey, everybody. This is a special surprise live stream of Citations Needed. We figured we would do a Citations Needed hot take live stream. This is a special surprise. I can hear myself on
Got it. It's fixed. Apologies.
Mike. No, that's all right. That's right. That means the system's working, Adam. It means the system's working. You know, we wanted to see how this would work. You know, maybe we'll do this more often. We'll see how it goes. Maybe this will be the first and only one because we hate it so much, but maybe not. So great to be with you, Adam. Good sir. Me in New York, you in Chicago.
Should I tweet this out or something so we can get people watching, or how do you want to do
this?
Hey,
I don't know. Sure. Go for it.
We'll do it on the Citations account so it's not too showy. Actually, I can't do it on the Citations account. Can you do it on the Citations account? Because I'm not logged in on this particular computer.
I can't do that right now.
You can or cannot? Be weird if you were like, no, I'm not. Wait, you can't do it? Why not?
I don't think I'm logged in. Hold on. This is, okay. This is the banter that everyone comes for.
Hold on. I can do it on my phone. Hold on. There's the only people watching are Florence and wait, no, there's other people watching now.
That's what I'm saying, right?
No, I got it. Well, I'm gonna tweet out the link real quick. In the meantime, why don't you regale us with updates?
What's it's called vamping, right?
Is that the term vamping?
So hi everyone. Of course, I'm Nima Shirazi. That is Adam Johnson of Citations Needed. And we have jumped on this live YouTube stream to talk about some news of the day. Adam and I were chatting earlier, and I'm gonna put words in his mouth right now because he's tweeting.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to promote this because if two podcasts blow hard in the forest and does it make a noise? It does not.
It does not fucking count. Then we're not doing our job. But Adam mentioned to me earlier that he had takes for days, you know, that he walks around furious and angry like any good podcaster does all day. And so we figured a way to vent that anger. You know, we might as well do that live on YouTube because, you know, that's what the kids do. So Adam, if I can put you on the spot, do you mind if I put you on the spot?
Yeah. What should I call this for Twitter?
We should crowdsource that. We should crowdsource that.
Going live right now on YouTube and surprise show. That sounds weird. That sounds hostile. Unplanned. That sounds half-ass. What term should I use here?
What do people in the
I don't know. There's a term
in the chat want.
I'm gonna say unannounced.
Super secret live stream.
Yeah, going live right now on YouTube for unannounced live news brief. All right,
unannounced, but you're announcing it. See, this is the
unannounced prior. You're being literal minded. I'm tweeting it out. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. Done. Now sit back and watch the ratings roll in.
The magic. This is we're losing.
Right, so let's talk. Yeah, there's many things in the
So here's the thing. So here's the thing, Adam. Hold on.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, you walk around angry all day, which I hope is not true. But even if that's, you know, it's kind
of true. It's not really a bit.
So I think there are a number of things we could talk about today, but one of the things that we have been kind of chatting back and forth about is the rise and now currently falling and continuing to fall fortunes of one Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and how Meatball Ron is, you know, doing his damnedest to be as cruel as possible to get those ratings up, to get those Trump bumps. But you know, the fact that Donald Trump still exists seems to be kind of a thorn in the side of his polling numbers. But you had takes on this, and so, you know, we figured what better to do than hop on fucking YouTube and talk about Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump, because isn't that what everyone wants?
Yeah, of course. Well, there's a few topics we'll talk about. We'll start with Meatball Ron, because I know you and I are offline. We talk a lot about how fascinating it is to watch his whole shtick kind of implode. So there's two things that Meatball Ron has working against him, like, that are not political, sort of the sort of amoral sort of process criticisms, right? If I'm like Chuck Todd or James Carville and I'm doing the, like, you know, stuff we hate on the show, we're gonna go and do that now. Sure. Number one, he's short, and we live in a country that unfortunately, like, never elects short presidents. So, but that aside,
That's the one reason I'll never be president.
Which is where Meatball Ron, I think, sort of originated. Although it's weird, it's the only nickname I think Trump's ever taken back and like apologized for, because I think he was genuinely weird. He was going to alienate his Italian fan base because he's captured 94% of Italians. Like Italian Americans used to be like anarchist and cool and communist, and now labor leaders, and now they're all like 97% of them are cops who live in the suburbs and they love Trump. So that's just what happens. You come and you sell out. It's the American way. To our Italian American listeners who fall listening, I apologize. I don't mean to say, you're the part of the 6%. You don't count. You're one of the good ones. But anyway, so he is, and the second thing he has working against him, of course, is that he has absolutely zero charisma, right?
Yeah.
Which
was supposed to be like the benefit for your like non-Trumper Republicans, right? It was like Trump right, without the showmanship.
But here's the thing,
that was going to be a positive.
He's not funny. He's aggressively unfunny and uncharismatic. And America only really elects funny people, right? Trump, sorry, objectively funny. Biden, very funny. Obama was hilarious. He's only one of the few people on earth who can pull off smug, like to the point where you actually it's very hard to pull that off. I've been trying for 38 years. I failed. Before him, of course, George W. Bush, unfortunately, again, evil or criminal, very funny, because funny or not is sort of a value neutral thing. Now, Clinton, funny, obviously. Prior to Clinton, George H.W. Bush, not funny, but living on the glow of Reagan, who was unfortunately funny. Again, these are value neutral analysis. Funny does not make you good. Lots of funny people are in fact huge assholes or evil, as evidenced by the 8,000 different Me Too scandals in the world of comedy. Nevertheless, Ron DeSantis is trying to do the Trump shtick, but he just has no charisma. Is not funny, right?
Yeah.
Trump goes to Erie, Pennsylvania, 2 weeks before the election, and does a stand-up riff where he makes fun of Erie. He says, I'm paraphrasing here, but something to the effect of, "I was up before the virus. Now I have to come to Erie, Pennsylvania."
Right.
Let's be honest. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't running for president. I mean, that's funny. Like, that's just like, he's negging these, like, and of course they're all standing in freezing weather, like, because they're all just, chuds going, make fun of me. I mean, he literally just tells people they're dumb rednecks and they're like, fuck yeah. Because whatever, it's a shtick. He imports a lot of horrible things with his like, wink, wink, I'm doing ironic racism, ironic fascism, but I'm really doing it, but it's very effective, right? And that's part of his appeals. He can do the, like, throw out the trial balloon, and then when people call him on, people say, "Oh, it's just a joke."
It's just a joke, right?
Because sometimes he is just joking, but a lot of times he's not. Like, he genuinely, of course, has very deep, very sincere commitments to racism. It's earnest. I was once doing this lecture at Pace University, and somebody asked me, like, it was like 2016. He's like, "What's Trump's play with this racism? Like, what's his angle?" I'm like, he's just racist. Like,
you're like, just a
no,
racist person.
He's a true believer in racism. It's not a put on like other, like some Republicans. Although, again, that's
also,
that's a great, but that's a gradient though, right? It's a gradient. And Ron DeSantis just has a lot of the same evilness and cruelty and vindictiveness, and like, let's find the most vulnerable group and throw them under the bus.
Yeah.
But I'm going to sound
and make a show of it, but not do it in a way.
Yeah. But I'm going to sound and look like a prison guard from a Frank Darabont movie, right? Like, I'm not, right. There's no,
even that's more interesting.
There's just nothing there. He's just an utterly humorless bully. He looks like the guy in the 80s movie who says, who told you could ski on my dad's mountain? Like, he just has that look of like an 80s bully who's not funny. And so invariably, to get to the sort of point here,
right? It's like there's the funny asshole, and then just like the asshole, and he's correct. Doing the asshole.
And a lot of people in Republican media were banking on DeSantis being their savior, because he's basically has all the cruelty, all the MAGA stuff of Trump, but theoretically was supposed to be a little more predictable in certain things. He didn't have all the baggage with respect to sex scandals. Right. He wouldn't talk about people's menstrual cycles on Twitter, all this sort of erratic stuff that they wanted to capture.
He'd be like what they want him to be on Russia, on Iran, on Syria, on whatever.
Right. Which of course Trump was in many key ways, but he was rhetorically very inconsistent. Right. It was mostly rhetorical. Like, he would say, "Well, NATO fucking sucks," and you're like, you can't say that. And of course he would increase their funding, right, policy wise. But he was erratic on those things. I think it's fair to say, and the Republican establishment never liked that for obvious reasons. The DeSantis was supposed to be the best of both worlds. He was supposed to sort of bridge the divide. The problem is that people can smell a phony. Again, he's not very charismatic. I do think his cruelty is somewhat sincere. I think he genuinely.
Oh yeah, I think he's a legitimately terrible person.
But his like, yes, because so to prop up his candidacy, and this is where the sort of media angle comes in. He pretty much has one play, and it's let's put on a press conference where I stand in front of something saying like parents' rights or attack, get back at the woke crowd or whatever, some sort of silly little slogan. Yeah. And then he just every like week and a half, 2 weeks, he announces some new cruel, mean policy directed at unions, teachers, trans people, gay and trans people, black people, immigrant. I mean, sort of name your like bucket list of people we want to put on the sort of oppression list. And he does this, of course, to get national press, to sort of make a splash and kind of try to out Trump. And his poll numbers have dropped precipitously. He's done 20 points since January, and they are in the Real Clear Politics average for the Republican primary. Yeah. I think he went from roughly, like 40 to, it was like 45, 55 to something like 25, 20, depending on what poll you look at, somewhere as low as 15%. Pretty soon, I think he'll be eclipsed by Sununu, who's polling at 8%. I don't know what's going on with that.
That's never a good sign.
You don't want to be behind.
I've been around long enough to know that that's a bad sign.
Hey, that's Sununu. That has weight. That's like the Kennedys for people from New England. And so it's the problem with this, the moral hazard with this, as we talked about offline, Nima, is that he will continue, I think, to become more cruel and more vindictive in these policies. Like just today, they expanded the "Don't Say Gay" bill to 12th graders. It was supposed to be, we don't want to discuss sexuality in front of 5-year-olds, to kind of as the hook, as the sort of Trojan horse. And everyone said, well, it's not about, it's going to be about children, it's going to be about everyone in school. And of course, they expanded to 12 years old. So same thing to do with the anti-trans legislation. It's about protecting kids. And then before you know it, like Missouri says, if you're under the age of 26, you can't do this, and this. Right. You can't have any trans healthcare whatsoever. So he keeps with every couple of weeks, he keeps doing these press conferences announcing these new policies, which are not theoretical, right? This isn't like when Trump was running and he's just the CEO of Trump, Trump LLC in the Canary Island, tax, whatever. He has no real power in many ways, except for his rhetorical power, which does matter, but he's not the governor, mayor, senator. I guess senators don't really have power, but you see my point. Like, he's actually doing things. He's passing actual laws in Florida, actual policy, and just to juice his numbers. Like the sort of, I remember the first Fast and the Furious movie, they'd be like, oh, I'm behind in this race with 3 seconds left. I'm going to press the NOS button. And I remember the first time
you zoom.
And I remember watching that when I was like 15 years old, going, well, wait a second. I was already playing this at the end. Why doesn't the other guy have a NOS button? And why don't they just have 7 NOS buttons? And why don't they just make the car full of not, like I did, like this is a gimmick, right? It's sort of 7-minute abs. Like it's, I'm going to keep pressing that NOS button to create increasingly gimmicky, cruel policies to try to juice my national poll numbers, because nobody fucking likes me. Because what it takes to win for governor is just not the same as running for president. Like, we've learned this with Jeb Bush. We've learned this with, Tim Scott. I could name you all these also-rans that came on and you're like, this fucking guy, this dead weight is going to be the guy who's going to be president. Yeah. They got no swag. They got no juice. They're not funny. There's nothing likable about their story. He's sort of like a prep school bully. There's no narrative. There's no grand vision. Because again, like the Republican Party of the 2000s, without discussing the sort of moral properties of whether or not they're better or worse, I think in many ways they were as bad or worse. But if you watch like the 2004 Republican convention versus the 2020 Republican convention, they had some kind of vision, right? It was bullshit, but it was like, it very much, it wasn't even that dissimilar to much of the Democratic vision, which in terms of, minority participation in charter schools, like, housing for everybody, right? Like, we're going to have The Rock come out in 2004. We're going to sort of have some kind of entrepreneurial vision. It was sort of this Reagan optimism. Yeah. That was, again, obviously bullshit. It was
like a phony coherence.
It had a vision of something that wasn't pure I mean, again, it had demagogue, right? 2004, Bush ran on the gay protect marriage amendment, all this horrible stuff. I'm not saying it was, but there was some element that had some like positive vision. And then they just sort of gave up on that, especially under Trump. And it was just doom and gloom and rapists and immigrants, and everything got really nasty. All the sort of, kind of third way puffery around charter schools or any kind of entrepreneurial blah, 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 progress narrative, the kind of stand and deliver bullshit, all that went away. And it was just the nasty rhetoric without any of the sort of a pretense of any kind of vision at all. And so when you strip that out completely, when you distill that to its lowest common denominator, which is what the Republican platform is these days, in terms of its most popular, you could have Mitt Romney go on MSNBC, but nobody fucking cares. He has no following, right? Outside of Utah. Like when you strip that away and you take away the like bullyish humor of Trump. Yeah. Then you have absolutely nothing. You just have cruelty. You just have meanness, and that you can't just, you can't keep pressing that NOS button. And this is why in the last, month, there's been like 50 stories.
I might argue you can.
Well, again, I'm now slipping back from normative to conversations to process criticisms. Sure. But again, there's all these leaks that have come out from Republican donors and Republican pollsters, which is basically just a Republican donors like spokesperson, right? Where they're worried that the 2022 midterms, they're underperforming the midterms relative to historical trends, and the way like the all the nonstop crime stuff in certain states like Pennsylvania just completely didn't work to move the needle. That didn't work with Paul Vallas in Chicago. That there's a real sense that like they're just kind of pressing the cruelty button. And they don't have anything left.
Seeing what happens,
and that is diminishing returns. Now, again, this is a process criticism, not a normative criticism. The normative criticism, of course, is that they're evil regardless. But then you watch DeSantis sort of fumble, and you're like, oh, well, obviously, that was, we don't want to preemptively write him off, but I think it's fair to say that like there's no juice in that meatball. We've talked about this before, and you see that, and you're like, oh, there's like without the sort of evil charisma of Trump, and the like erraticism. And the like weird populism around Social Security.
Yeah.
Again, he surrounds himself with everyone who wants to gut Social Security, so it's not like it's sincere, but the rhetoric, right? The like weird faux anti-war rhetoric. Without that, you really just have like the worst kind of zombie heritage, anti-poor, anti-trans, without any kind of anything, who also wants to gut your Social Security. Oh, and by the way, wants to ban abortion, like
which
for everybody.
can work. But I think it's this idea of diminishing returns.
Well, right? The play is you run to the far right in the primaries, and then they try to rebrand DeSantis as this like, suburban soccer dad for the primary, for the general election. And but you've just it's just nasty and mean and unfunny, and it's like, why would I have some cheap Ursance Trump when I could have the real thing?
Well, I think that's the thing.
No substitutes.
It's this like, trying to be the most MAGA of MAGAs, but like Trump is there. So like, how you're not gonna out Trump because Trump is still around. So, I mean, I think that's what we're seeing. We're anyone who listens to Citations knows that we're not poll watchers, but I think there is something interesting.
Well, the poll watching is relevant here because it informs his media play, right?
Exactly.
It's a media story
because of how he keeps showing up, which is why it's not just the policy, but the policy is always coupled with or like reliant on these showy press conferences, right? This is all part of the building of the brand, and it seems like that's not working.
Yeah. Well. Governors love to do the bill signings and the press conferences with the placard and the like slogan, and they're always flanked by like a cop and like a token black guy, and ideally a black cop, and then like 3 children for some reason, and
like
then
someone in a hard hat, like the Village People.
Yeah, and then they'll have like a pale worker guy, and then there's some kind of Phyllis Schlafly type, and then they was looking very concerned about the children,
and then like a bunch of like white dudes in suits,
and then a bunch of like evil white guys in suits who donated to Harlan Crow's Nazi memorabilia fund or whatever, And it's like, all right, we're gonna take charge. They always like, have task force. We're gonna have the anti-woke. Woke comes to die in Florida. And it's like, all right, this is gonna be your thing for the next 2 years. In the meantime, all these people, these real vulnerable groups are gonna suffer. Academia is gonna suffer. Again, it's a horror show what's going on in Florida. Just so one guy can, again, A, he does genuinely believe it, but also B, so he can run for president under the asshole prick wing of the party, which is now apparently 80-90% of the party. And again, it's going to be for naught anyway. It's just going to be, he's gonna step over all these people and get nowhere, and then he'll get some job at some, investment bank or a think tank or whatever they end up doing.
I like how you're just mapping out Ron DeSantis's the rest
well,
of
it's
this.
They'll become, there's some lawyer for some firm, principal, or they stay, or they go to the Senate to rot away. Or they get involved in like shady land deals and Florida stuff.
So with that said, and thank you everyone for joining us live to our first guerrilla live stream. That's gorilla with a U, not an O.
Is that a Captain Ron reference? You said gorillas.
And you know me, I'm all Captain Ron references. It's all anything Kurt Russell related. But I did want Adam to talk about you have a new piece up in the Real News as the resident writer among us. I don't write anymore.
True.
It's very sad. It's very sad.
You have obligations. Though. You have a day job. I don't. Big difference.
But yeah, tell us about the us. That was the collective us. Tell the wonderful live stream viewers about your new article. I will admit, I thought it was really good. It
you have
riffs on something that we have talked about previously, which is this really striking New York Times series, investigative series on child labor in the United States. So we've talked about that a bit before, but you kind of use that as well as something we've already also talked about, and something you've written a ton about, which is like the pearl clutching, shoplifting media attention, the kind of Walgreens horseshit, and you kind of fuse both of these together in the way that folks are reacting to this, like not only how media is putting this out, but also kind of the if there is something really terrible in the world, what do people think should actually happen? What are the calls to action? And you kind of compared the two. So
it's a sort of classic.
As tell us about the new piece, and everyone should go read it. It's on the Real News.
A classic media sort of analysis where you sort of show the double standard, right? So 6 weeks ago, the New York Times had a 6,500 word expose followed up by several subsequent reports that detailed widespread thousands and thousands of cases of child labor exploitation of children as young as 12 working.
Written by Hannah Dreier. Really, really amazing stuff, actually.
Written by Hannah Dreier. Well, I have some minor criticisms with how she framed it, but I'm not out there writing the story, so I'm not going to criticize that. But I thought there was a lot of typical kind of New York Times softball.
I mean, it is in the New York Times. But.
Yeah, no, I get it. But again, that being said, last 2 months, in last 20 years, I have produced exactly zero journalistic exposés on child labor. So I'm a media critic, though I don't do real reporting. It's way too hard. But there was huge splash, right? Within 2 days, less than 2 days, the White House had a plan of action. They were going to crack down. Right. Members of Congress sort of had press conferences, pundits. It sort of made a splash because it was everyone's shocked that gambling's going on in here, kind of routine. Exactly, everyone knows this is going on. This is, which the report, to its credit, did say, like, everyone knows this is happening. The Biden White House knew this was happening. Everyone knew it was happening. HHS knew it was happening.
Yeah, child labor,
Homeland Security knew was happening.
To strike inside U.S. kind of report.
Now, one thing I noticed since this 6 weeks happened, examining the New York Times editorial on it, the Washington Post's lack of editorial on it, punditry on CNN, the various subsequent New York Times meta coverage, the sort of daily podcasts. the Biden White House's response, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. There was zero mention that any response was going to involve prisons. There was one throwaway line in the Biden White House saying they will do criminal referrals when it's appropriate. But this is pro forma. They say that they've said that for years. And as far as I can tell, they haven't really prosecuted anyone criminally for this. They will prosecute the low level brokers that are basically doing the sort of human trafficking aspect of it. They never actually criminally sanctioned any of these subcontractors, or God forbid the major corporations that were named in this article: Target, Whole Foods, Walmart, Ben and Jerry's, all of whom use child labor they launder it through subcontractors, but they use them, and they know they use them because the subcontractors they use have a long history of being fined for child labor. Sure. This is not a mystery, right? But the second the story broke, everyone did the hot dog suit guy. We're going to find out who did this. And not a single one of these policy prescriptions to crack down mentioned any jail time, somewhat conspicuously. The White House didn't mention it. The New York Times editorial didn't mention it. They made vague reference, although they didn't explicitly say that they were going to they want to decrease the fine. So the fine for using child labor. So if I have a 12-year-old, 11-year-old that is cleaning out guillotine shears and meat packing instruments, which many of these reports had, right? The fine I get is the maximum fine I can get is $15,128.
Right.
The fine for illegally pirating films is $250,000. Like if I go to like AMC and I record, whatever, Marvel 775, whatever it is, and I go sell that and I widely distribute that, I can serve up to 3 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. There is no mandatory, there is no prison sentence for first-time child labor offenders. Or even second time, I don't believe. And there's a reason for this, which is that exploited immigrant labor doesn't have lobbyists. The film industry does. And then, of course, there's also broader systemic reasons why this is, which is to say, because everyone knows it goes on and they don't give a shit because it weakens unions and drives down it drives down wages. That's why you use children. They drive down wages for adults and for everyone else, and also they're easier to manipulate. They're easier to exploit. They're easier to sexually harass. They're easier to treat like shit. They're usually more desperate, so they're more willing to do the sort of unseemly work. Now the response to that was, well, why don't we, and then I compare that, of course, to the shoplifting pandemic, but also the sort of subsequent retail theft, viral videos, all that stuff, where every single article in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal that reported on those all talked about policy prescriptions to solve this problem. Every single one of them listed longer, tougher prison sentences as the most obvious solution.
Increasing the criminalization as a deterrent, as a punishment, right? So like, this isn't to say like, we are advocating for more people to be locked up.
Yeah.
We're saying that this is how, I just want to make clear.
It's a double standard. Yeah.
Exactly. That this is what these editorial boards consistently call for. More arrests, more sentences, longer terms, like all of these things. It is clear how, when something is taken seriously, right, what the instant kind of call to action is by for instance, all of these high profile editorial boards.
There was one exception, which was there was a bill proposed by Senator Brian Schatz, as well as Senators Tammy Baldwin, Tammy Duckworth, John Fetterman, Dick Durbin, that would have proffered a jail sentence for I believe, for repeat offenses. They would have had a jail sentence and a fine up to $50,000. They said a year in jail for repeat offenses. It's not clear how you define repeat. Jail already exists for repeat offenders, but again, as far as I know, and I asked the Department of Labor, I never heard back. They've never arrested any corporate executive or manager for repeat offenses, that at least in the recent history that I've seen. And if that's wrong, please let me know. I mean, I asked them, I looked for it, I couldn't find it. They almost always get these token fines. You heard these stories about, dozens of 12, 13-year-olds cleaning up meat packing factories in Iowa. They got a fine of $1.5 million, but the company's, net profits that year are, in the tens of millions. It's kind of a rounding error. And oftentimes when they get these big fines, what they'll do is they'll just close down that particular LLC and reopen a new one under a different name with the same management structure and everything, which again, the New York Times report makes clear. And so like, clearly no one takes this seriously, right? Everybody knows it's factored in. It's a cost of doing business. Having 12-year-olds work these dangerous, hazardous jobs, oftentimes overnight, by the way. These are oftentimes after the meatpacking plant closes, or the poultry factory or whatever the kind of industrial or agricultural. They'll work often from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. That's actually how they track down many of these workers. They basically waited outside of these poultry and meatpacking plants in the Midwest, or construction jobs, very common. And so it's the grammar with which one shows empathy in our society is calling for tougher prison sentences, exactly. Right? When there was a controversy over Prop 47 in California that increased the penalty increased the threshold from $400 to $950 for shoplifting, they said from making that the felony cutoff, they said by making it a misdemeanor and oftentimes a finable offense, or community service, you've effectively made it legal. That was the argument. So if we literally never arrest anyone for having 12-year-olds clean fucking meat grinders, by that logic, we literally know and don't care. Right. And so it
is effectively legal.
It is just not considered. It is just ontologically not part of the equation. We don't consider fining large corporations for wage theft. We don't consider for stealing, right? Amazon steals $62 million. They get fined from the flex tip drivers. They get fined to the FTC $62 million. They basically do an oopsie wootsy. Let me give you the money back. I stole $300 from merchandise from Walgreens. The DA doesn't give me the option to just pay it back. They don't do the oopsie wootsy, the oopsie daisy.
They throw the book at you because
they put you in jail. They put you in jail and prison. And this double standard, I think, is sort of exactly why. And again, this is not arguing that we necessarily increase prison sentences for these things. I think it's certainly the other way around in terms of what the policy solution is, but it does show that there's just a two-tier justice system, which is, again, not the most original point. There is a two-tier justice system in this country, and the wealthy corporations and even their subcontractors get these bullshit fines that are a fucking joke because the fines are factored into the risk analysis. They're factored in. They know that when they hire the children. A $15,128 fine. And the Biden White House hasn't specified what they think the new fine should be. They're just vaguely asking Congress to make it larger. And Congress isn't going to do anything because it's controlled by Republicans and everyone knows that. But the White House hasn't used its bully pulpit to call for prison sentences. It's not calling for prosecuting anyone. Thus far, they haven't prosecuted anyone in the last 6 weeks. They haven't talked about criminal charges against anyone, except for, again, some low-level brokers who are the ones who sort of take the children from the HHS into these kind of labor services. So they'll go after the little fish, but they're not going to go after these large corporations, which knowingly, again, this is the New York Times own reporting, knowingly hire these kids. They know that they hire kids, but they know it's cheap and it reduces profits and they don't care.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's really critical to just think about how the language of taking something seriously in our press and in our politics is so intimately linked with criminalization that when you don't see that, it is clear what is being taken seriously and what is not. It's kind of a tell, right? So anyway, again, we have some folks joining us live watching this. Thank you so much for hopping on. We may start doing this more often. Who knows? We will also be streaming live a week from tonight on April 26th. We're going to do a live begathon, as we call it, a listener drive, a fundraising drive with our excellent guest, Sarah Bond, who is a history professor at the University of Iowa. We're going to be talking about ancient aliens and History Channel, Discovery Channel horseshit. It's going to be a truly wonderful time. So please do tune in a week from tonight. We're going to start streaming at 8:30 Eastern PM, in the PM, of course. That's the nighttime. So please do join us for that. Of course, if you are already a supporter of the show, Thank you so much. If you are not, maybe consider becoming a supporter of the show through patreon.com/citations needed podcast. That would truly help. You can do that now, or you can wait a week and do it during the fundraiser, or you can do it tomorrow morning when you wake up and you're like, why didn't I do that? Or if you already do support us, again, thank you. Adam, before we end this live stream tonight, I have a question about what's hanging on the wall behind you. Because I think it's important.
We don't have to tell people that.
I think it's important to note that you are, I'm not calling that you listen to a lot of, you read a lot of history books and you listen to a lot of history audiobooks. And I have been noticing lately when we've been talking recently, that something that a topic we kind of get around to a lot are popes. And so, I think it's important that we talk very briefly about
we're definitely cutting this out when we put it on
about like why what kind of flashcards you're making for yourselves so you can remember every single pope in order.
I'm not trying to remember popes. It's just if you want to sort of, if you study medieval history, popes are very important and they're hard to keep up with. So I have a poster of what is effectively the apostolic succession from the OG to the current pope, and I believe there's 263 or 68, something like that, something to that effect, if I'm not mistaken. Or is it 163? I can't remember. Anyway, and so that's why that's there. Is that it was just helping me keep my popes in order because I was getting a little confused when I was reading. I read a lot of history from the Middle Ages and early modern period. So the popes are important. They were hard to keep up with. So I just got a little poster. I have a lot of posters like that in my house. I mean, you can't see them here, but
it's all popesters in your
it's
house.
all popesters. I'm not a papist. Don't worry. I haven't been.
That was not my point. My point is that okay. I think it's awesome that you have a fucking pope poster. You have a popester behind you. So anyway, with that, we will leave this Citations Needed guerrilla live stream. Stay tuned for more like it. We will sometimes announce them, maybe sometimes not. But definitely tune in a week from tonight on Wednesday, April 26th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern for our live fundraiser begathon. We will have some fun goodies to give away, some Citations Needed merch, some books, some tote bags from not only our own tote bags, but some totes from the great arts and culture website Hyper Allergic. So do tune in to hear from our guest Sarah Bond, and thank you all for listening to and supporting Citations Needed. Of course, again, you can follow the show on Twitter at Citations Pod, Facebook Citations Needed, and become a supporter of the show if you are not already through patreon.com/Citations Needed podcast. So thank you again. That will do it for this live stream. I'm Nima Shirazi.